the USB-C
And
to
it's showing
HDMI.
on the screen right now.
It is? Okay, cool.
You guys gonna use that?
No,
No, not from here.
just the microphones. No, we'll be good.
Yeah, we're okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really want timers for when it's almost close to any.
That'd be cool.
5, 10.
Yeah, I think having like a 10-minute and 5-minute timer would be cool. But awesome, thank you. Okay, Brody, we're gonna have build books. Can you help us pass them out?
To the masses?
Yeah.
To the crowd?
When we start to talk about build books, I think that would be the good time, don't you, Zach? Or do we want to pass them out earlier?
Yeah, that sounds like a good time
Okay.
because otherwise people will be distracted.
Yeah, so whenever we bring up build books, we'll pass them out.
Do you like my undergarments?
I saw that. I'm like, little leggings sticking out.
This is not how it's supposed to be, but I'm like,
just make sure there's nothing in the zipper pocket. Then yeah.
oh my god.
My fake earring.
Okay, yeah. You can toss that, and we don't need that. Thank you. Just in the bag. Thank you. Our audience of one. True. But your support, Brody, you're part of the process. Okay, good. It came out? I'm glad. That is the worst. Whenever I was watching, what contest was that a while back? I think it was like the Iki contest. I was sitting next to my friend and it was Akon. I opened a soda bottle and it sprayed all over both of us, like in the audience, and we're just watching the contest, so we're like, we can't get up. We're just sitting here. The embroidery looks so cool. I like how you did on the sleeves too.
Plus our lovely tech support person with the camera back there. Oh my god. Are you like, I'm gagged. I thought there was no one.
I like how we haven't practiced this at all. We're just
No, of
we're
course
just going
not.
for it.
So do you want to like alternate slides? I mean, it's only being documented on camera. Is that live streamed or is that? Oh, where is it going? What live stream? Oh. I should delete that then, because I literally.
You what?
I put this. But then I was like, oh, there are people waiting. When I went to my panel, when I did my panel at AX, there was already, I would say like probably 80% of the room was already filled with people before I even got there.
Oh wow.
They already had been sitting because they don't clear the rooms at AX. They just, yeah.
Yeah. Probably like you were saying, alternating would be good. For the ones that are pictured in costumes in the beginning, I'll start for both those because they just have me until we get to the one with master's level.
Yeah.
And then the other person can always chime in. And,
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to be formal about it.
Yeah.
What? I think it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Oh, could I have my drink, please?
Come here.
Thank you, Brody. Okay, we can probably give it a few more minutes. Thank you. Okay, I'll go ahead and plug it in.
Oh my gosh, I was like, why is everyone scared of us? And I was like, oh wait, if you're up this close, you can't see the screen. So I was
yeah.
like, that makes sense. Like, stay back there. We are known to spit like llamas, so it's probably good that you're back far enough away from us anyway. But I love your costumes. You all look stunning.
Yeah, I love the Neptune twins, and y'all look so cute. I love these Christmas outfits.
Yeah.
Christmas in July, very important.
It's
How
like Christmas.
close do I have to be to this for it to work?
You have to be like where I am right here, like this.
Mine
so you need
doesn't
to move
come any closer. Oh, okay. I felt
Yeah.
resistance. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Want to just start?
Sure.
Let's just start.
Okay.
All right, kick us off.
All right, welcome everyone to Cosplay Contest 101, Behind the Curtain. Woo,
Behind the
spooky.
curtain.
With Stitch Crimes and
Savage. Hello.
hello everyone. So we're gonna start with a quick introduction. So I'm Stitch Crimes, or you can call me Sammy. I've been cosplaying since 2013, so I kind of feel like an elder at this point. It's weird. I've made over 50 cosplays, and I'm a master's level competitor, 13-time award winning, and I've been competing since 2016. And I'm pretty focused on craftsmanship, don't do as much of the performance side personally.
And hello, I am Savage. You can call me Zach or Savage, either one. Savage Lee Miller, average cosplay, all aliases of mine. I've been also cosplaying since 2013, so I didn't have to change that when I made the slide. I don't know how many cosplays I've made. I don't really want to count. So a lot. We'll just stick with a lot. Allegedly, I'm a master's level competitor. Maybe some would disagree. No, I'm kidding. I have only 8 awards, not the 11 like my sister next to me, but I've been competing since 2015. I am also a craftsmanship focused cosplayer, and I'm a loudmouth and a diva. So yeah.
All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about today is choosing a cosplay you want to compete in. So,
Okay. So there's a lot of different elements that go into selecting a cosplay for competition. In a general sense, any cosplay can be competition worthy, and anything can win an award in a contest. And at the end of the day, you can enter whatever you want into a contest. But there are some elements that you may want to incorporate into your costumes to have the best chance at winning an award in your category or division. So what we have on here are just some suggestions. So one, we always try to work and learn things that are slightly outside of our comfort zone, just so we can learn new skills. Part of what's great about cosplay is continuously learning new things and pushing yourself and challenging yourself to learn, even if it's just one new skill on a cosplay, can be used later down the road and can demonstrate to the judges that you have tried something brand new. And usually that's pretty impressive. Also, we recommend incorporating a breadth of techniques for your skill level and that you can execute well. So what we mean by that is, if you are doing a dress, maybe rather than just sewing and constructing the dress, you add some type of embroidery to it, whether that's done with machine or by hand. Maybe you add beading to the dress, or even go further and say, oh, I'm gonna make this dress, but I'm gonna cobble my own shoes.
Okay,
Don't cobble
that.
your own shoes. No, you can if you want to. But just incorporating a breadth of techniques and different skills demonstrate more ability to show off your unique skill set, and kind of exemplify all of what you can do in a costume.
So yeah, and just picking like a character you love can also really help you to be motivated to work on it, or even if it's just a design you really like. Like, not gonna lie, I cosplay from League a lot because I think the designs are cool. I played League 3 times for approximately 30 minutes total. So even if it's just a design you're like super hyped for, it'll really help because some of these projects are going to be really like long haul projects, and so you want to keep your motivation up over that time.
And something I will say too is, if you can have an attachment to the media or the character beyond the design, it is going to help motivate you through the end of the project for sure. Like, cosplay whatever you want. You might not play the game, you might not even know who the characters are, you might just like the design, and that's totally fine. But what we've seen over our years is that if you select characters that you don't have an attachment to the media or the character itself, you're not as likely to finish your costume and actually be able to see it in a contest.
Yeah.
So
Don't just be like back in 2014 or whatever when people are like Trinity blood. That's what wins.
oh
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, just only Trinity blood. But yeah. Are you ready to move on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through, this was originally my presentation, so I apologize that a lot of these pictures are just of me.
What are you talking about? That's me on the right. I don't know what you're talking about.
But yeah, so I'm just going to kind of walk y'all through some of the cosplays I've chosen to compete in over the years and kind of like why. So the first one I ever competed in was Madoka here, and that was at Louisiana Anime 2016, and I got bullied into it. So I was printing off a picture in the hotel lobby right before the contest. But that one was just like, it got me really excited about cosplaying. And so then I decided to work on Forest, which is the one on the right from Fire Emblem Fates. And this one I ended up choosing because there were a lot of like sewn elements, but also I was able to incorporate a prop. And this was my first time really making a prop by myself, so I got to learn how to do that and also use Warbla for the hip armor and stuff, so kind of just like learning a variety of techniques. And then as I kind of got further along, I kept a pretty similar recipe for things I like to compete in because I like to choose things that have some wig work, a prop, and a lot of sewing because I find that those are things I can typically execute to a degree that I'm happy competing with them, and it shows a lot of different techniques. And then here we have some of our recent entries. So whenever you get to kind of like master's level, you're really kind of branching out there a lot of the time and choosing a bunch of techniques like
Yeah, so I mean, these costumes have a lot of different elements in them, and like we said before, they are good entries into a contest, specifically at a master's level, because they do show a lot of different techniques and skills. So I know that all of these, and the thing is, varying degrees of skills too. So in here we have wig styling. Okay, Sammy's hair loaf croissants that are on her head are definitely a lot more intense wig work than my wig that I have on my head, which is very lightly styled with like ears coming out of it. But prop making wise, like I know that was the first time for me actually using wood to make katanas. So it was my first time like woodworking, actually second time I think, but making katanas from like cedar picket fences. So it's like a combination of using somewhat unconventional materials and also a skill that I hadn't tried before. Mm-hmm. And your swords were made of like what, 3D print or?
Oh, the scissors are actually EVA foam. That was my first time making like a really massive EVA foam prop like that and trying to figure out like the hinge mechanism. Mm-hmm. And then I also chose to be actually insane and cobble my own shoes because it's just something, I watch a lot of like historical sewing and cobbling YouTube videos because I'm weird. And I have really massive feet, so I can never find cosplay shoes. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to do it. And it was my first time, so it was definitely not like 100%, but it's fun to branch out and learn new skills.
Right. And then we also have their complex sewing foundation garments included. So something that's unique about both of our costumes, probably Sammy's more so than mine here, but there are multiple layers to the costume. And while you might not be able to see, like in a photo, all of those layers, they do matter when you're being judged, especially if you made them yourself. So I think you have a petticoat on there. Did you make the petticoat?
Yeah, I made the petticoat and bloomers as well as a corset under that because she has so many layers of clothing that I wanted to keep the silhouette, and that meant slightly cinching my waist before adding another like 2 inches on top of it.
Right, and then on mine I have multiple layers of kimono underneath the actual jacket that's on top that are all full like layers lined and everything, and then the pants, the hakama pants, you can't really see from like my butt up, but I actually have like the proper construction for that. And so when you show a build book, which we'll get to, and you actually have those things broken out, it does really impress when you've made all those foundation garments yourself.
Yeah, definitely, like as you get further along, considering the things that even aren't visible when you're on stage but are things that the judges will take into consideration becomes more and more important. But like during my earlier stuff, like with Elise here, I bought that petticoat. I wasn't.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
All right. So now moving on to picking where to compete. So I typically tend to recommend, if you're stressed about it, like I have severe stage fright personally, so starting small and local can really help to kind of ease you in. And looking for contests with multiple entry levels is something I really recommend because sometimes smaller contests will just throw you into a pool, and it won't have the entry levels we'll talk about later, but typically like novice, journeyman, and masters. And it can be more fun if you're competing with people at a similar level and you don't feel like quite so overwhelmed.
Yeah, I highly recommend if you're starting out and you're competing, and even if you're at a like novice or journeyman level, you should enter a contest that's tiered and broken out in that way. It's the most fair, and if you're not in that tiered bracketed system, you may do well, but the likelihood of a master's level costume being compared directly against a novice level's costume, it's not fair, but some contests are structured that way. So my advice is probably just don't enter them unless you just want to go for the experience and the stakes are pretty low.
Yeah.
Also, we recommend trying a convention you've already been to. Cosplay contests take all of your day, basically. Especially if you're doing prejudging and the contest on the same day, you're going to be doing prejudging. You may be waiting, before your time up to an hour. We hopefully not, but you could be waiting up to an hour before your time, just in a hallway waiting to get in. You're being prejudged, and then depending on the contest, you may be lining up to like 3 or 4 hours before the actual show starts to do rehearsals and to get a count of everyone there. So it's a big time commitment. And so we say try a con you've already been to before, because a lot of people, myself included, can feel this type of like sunk cost when I am spending my whole day in contest judging to a con I've never been to before, and I want to see stuff, right? I want to go to panels, I want to go to the artist alley, I want to see my friends, and if I'm at a brand new convention I've never been to and I can't do those things, I kind of feel like, oh, I'm just in a room. But at the same time, depending if your mission is to go to a con to compete, then that's a whole different priority system. But again, recommend starting small, local, do a con you've already been to before. That way you know where everything is, hopefully, too.
Yes, that's a big one, because I know here last year I was competing at A-Fest and I'd never been to A-Fest before, and I was so confused about where to get to prejudging. It was like up the stairs and across the hallway and down. It was crazy.
Yeah, basically remove stressors that might be present if it's your first time competing, for sure, because you want literally as little stress as possible when you're doing a contest for like your first or second time.
Yeah. And make sure your friends can come to support you. It really helps to have at least one person. Like I have lovely Stitch Crimes handler here rocking his handler husbando shirt today, but it definitely helps to at least have one friend with you the whole time to help handle and kind of calm you down. If anything breaks, they help you fix it and just keep you like going throughout the day, as well as having friends in the audience can be fun because they'll really like hype you up when you go across the stage.
Right. And here's my tea that I added in here. So one, review the judging panel ahead of time, because if you have been making costumes for a while and you have a certain set of skills yourself, and your judging panel that you see at a con does not represent what you think should be present to judge adequately, as in the cosplay judges that they have present don't know how to sew, they've never made a costume before, they probably should not be judging. It's not their fault that they were selected to be judges. The convention coordinators selected them. But if you are going to enter a contest, you want to be confident that the people judging you have the adequate skills and experience to know how to judge properly. And you don't want to put yourself into a position where you actually had really good work to demonstrate, but they didn't have the right background or knowledge to assess your work. So it happens. Conventions do put people as judges that really should not be judges. Again, not to their own fault. They were asked and they accepted. It's upon the convention to select proper judges for contests. But so review the panel to make sure that you think that they can adequately perform their job. And it's okay if you think they can't. You don't have to enter that contest. In fact, you probably shouldn't, because your work probably won't be judged properly.
Yeah. It's better not to enter than to enter and be like, man, they didn't judge well. It's like, well, you kind of knew the judging panel ahead of time.
Right. And ask your friends about the reputation of the contest. Every contest is different. Every convention coordinator and cosplay coordinator is different. Some contests are run exceptionally well. Some are run terribly. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you are waiting, like I said, like 5 hours before the contest without any chairs or water provided to you, and you're like sitting there all day long, and then even worse, it runs late and it's just chaos. So ask your friends. Actually, if you're interested in competing, there is a Discord server that's pretty public as long as you like request to join, for Texas competitors, and they have reputations of all of the major contests in there, at least for Texas. So you can ask people in there and say, hey, how was your experience? Because again, you don't want to set yourself up for a contest that is just bad. So
Yeah, if y'all want to join the Discord, we have cards up here for afterwards, and if you just DM us, we'll send you the link. I forgot to add a QR code or anything for it.
no, it's okay.
But yeah.
And then if you want to get into competing, but you are not quite ready to take the stage and have the long time commitment, you can enter the Hall Cosplay Contest. Even if you just don't want to deal with the main cosplay contest because of the time commitment it takes, you can enter the Hall Contest. They should have experienced judges as well running that contest, but it's really low time commitment. Usually there isn't even a pre-registration. You just show up and get a place in line. You go in and get prejudged. They look at your costume and that's it. You don't have to go on the stage. You don't have to like do a like performance or a walk on that has any type of like performance element. You just go to the hall contest room, get judged, and maybe win something. Usually the prizes are going to be lower stakes than the main contest because the commitment's also a lot lower, but it's a good opportunity if you want to get your work judged or potentially win something, but you don't want the full commitment.
Yeah, definitely highly recommend that. I think we'll talk about them a little bit more later. But yeah, so just some examples. This is slightly outdated, RIP Acon. Examples of some contests in Texas. I'd say that probably this year AFES is like a pretty large contest.
This year specifically,
yeah,
I think so.
This year is massive, but like you can have your really small conventions. Like I was guessing at AggieCon last time I presented this, so that's why that's up there. Like you could go to your college convention and compete or something. And you have your more medium-sized conventions or large ones, and you can even start competing at large ones if you feel ready for that. Just make sure you're like prepared for it to be a bit more overwhelming potentially, but they can be really fun too. And also one bad thing is if you compete at small contests for a long period of time, you're going to get bumped up to masters very quickly, and then it will be a lot harder to break into competing at the bigger contests, and because you might not feel that you're master's level yet at a larger contest if you swept small contests for years.
It's true. Maybe we'll talk about that later too with the brackets of awards and everything.
Yeah. So yeah,
hall contests, like I mentioned, good for starting out if you don't have a lot of time. Usually you pop in, it's maybe like, depending on how many people are in line ahead of you, maybe like a max like 25, 30 minute time commitment probably. There's no performance or stage presence required at all. And it's pretty low stress because you're not having to, set aside all that time. And usually, again, it's flexible. You just show up whenever you want within that window of judging. And your only job is to present your costume to the judges in that room and sell yourself. You don't really have to do anything else.
Yeah, and this is actually a cosplay I entered at IkiCon's Hall contest back in like 2018 or something, because my friend and I were doing a skit in the main contest, but I still wanted to do craftsmanship judging, and it was probably a 15-minute total commitment.
Yeah, and I've done a few hall contests before, just because we said, why not? Like, I don't think I never went to a con saying, I'm going to enter the hall. I kind of just made something and showed up, and I was like, oh, that's there. Sure. And I went and did it, and then I won stuff, and I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
So yeah. Although I will say, sometimes conventions will elect to bring you onto the stage to get your award. So during the award ceremony at the end of the contest, they may ask you at the hall contest, hey, by the way, if you win something, we're going to text you, come to the cosplay contest and then come on the stage to get your award. So you might have to go up on the stage to collect an award and then leave, potentially. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can probably tell them that you're not comfortable doing that, and they'll work with you on it. But that's sometimes how they do that.
All right, so going on to choosing your type of entry with group or individual. So there's a lot of pros and cons to groups. It can be really good because it's fun with your friends, and you can also get a little bit more time during prejudging, but normally it doesn't make up for having a whole second person. So if your cosplays aren't pretty similar, it won't really help you. And it just gives you a chance to show more skills and techniques, because if you have two costumes that are different, they might have more of a breadth of techniques than a single one.
Right.
And I personally think for skits, having a group can be better because it can be a lot more engaging to have two people on stage than just one person.
Yeah, and I will say here also that groups are tricky because while there's a lot of benefit to be had with demonstration of skills, like Sammy said, There's also a lot of risk because you're only as good as your weakest link in the group. So if we had, I'll use an example, a Legend of Zelda group, and we had Link and Zelda, and the Link was made immaculately. There was leather working involved. Oh, the velvet was sewn beautifully. The wig was perfect. There was a Master Sword that was impeccable. And then the Zelda literally was slapped together in 10 minutes. That's going to seriously affect your score. And if you would have entered separately and put the Link by himself, he probably would have placed really high, but because the Zelda was there and was bringing it down, it probably would keep them from winning. So that can happen. Also, if the costumes are completely disconnected. So if you have two things like a Link and a Zelda, and one of them was, knitted from yarn and one was made from normal conventional materials, it's like, why are these two together? So you want the group to be cohesive, and if not using the same materials, use similar types of materials and finishes. That way it looks like you're an actual group, which can be hard if you're working on a group from long distance and you're not physically in the same space.
Yeah, it's definitely I think groups can be really fun, and especially if you're there more for the experience and just to have fun as a group of friends. But I consider it kind of like moving in with your best friend. It could go really well or it could go really terribly, and you will not be friends after it. So just tread a little bit carefully with it if you're the type of person who gets super serious about things like this, and maybe your friend's not quite like that. They're just there to have fun. If y'all aren't at the same level of wanting to put the same amount of effort into it, it could be a little bit of tension there. So.
And the only other thing I'll add is that when I first started competing, I was nervous. I didn't know anyone in the cosplay convention scene, and I wanted to have someone there with me as a friend to go through the entire day of contest commitment, because it's a long time. So having a friend with you to at least pass the time with and to be there with is really nice. So I usually entered in with a group of one other person, sometimes a third person. And it wasn't until I had competed for a while and met and kind of learned people in the community that I was like, okay, I can do this by myself now. But yeah, I think that groups can also provide more of a safety, a comfort net, as long as, again, you are taking all this into consideration.
All right, so moving on to levels of competition. So there's some typical levels that you'd see in a lot of contests. Sometimes there's a youth category for competitors. I've seen it younger than 13 or younger than 16. And this is mainly just because you don't really want to pit them up against adults. And also half the time, the parents are making the cosplay, so,
right.
Which is understandable at that age. And then you often have an exhibition category, which I heard that they're doing something like that here as the halftime show.
I think so. Yeah. It's basically a category where cosplayers can walk the runway but not be eligible to win awards or be prejudged because they didn't make enough or any of their costume, but they want to be able to show their costume and demonstrate it. So it's the inverse of the hall cosplay contest, where in that you're only being judged on craftsmanship, but you're not doing anything with the show. This is you're only doing stuff with the show and you're not being judged at all. So you're ineligible to win anything from that.
It can be fun if you just really want to get up there and look cute and have a fun time. I had a friend who did that when I was competing one time, just so we could hang out together backstage. But she was too stressed out to go through prejudging and stuff, even though she made her cosplay. So she was like, I'll just walk the stage. Yeah. Yeah.
And then we have novice, so that's going to be your base category for cosplayers that have either never entered a contest before, have not won major awards, usually have less than 2 years of experience, although you don't have to. If you've been cosplaying for 8 years and you've just never entered a contest before and you've never won anything, you could enter into novice.
Except I will say with a caveat, these are the general rules, but some contests do have specific rules. So these are a guideline, but always read the contest rules.
Yes.
Because I actually have seen ones that specify that if you have over a certain amount of experience, you do have to enter higher.
Yeah, so read the rules is the takeaway. But these are if there's no rules, these are the general, what you can have in your brain to place yourself properly. Journeyman is going to be more years of experience. You would have assumed to have won at least some number of major awards, not a non-zero amount. And then masters generally is going to be for those that have won a number of major awards or have professional schooling or training. So case in point, my friend Megan Vivera, she was professionally trained in fashion design. And so coming out of school, she had professional schooling on that. And she, for a lot of contests, had to enter the master's level from the immediate inception of her competition because she couldn't enter at a novice or journeyman because she had professional training. So some contests, again, read the rules, but generally, if you have professional schooling in costume design, you're not entering at a novice level. And then the last one is interesting.
Yeah, I've actually seen this at some contests, especially larger ones.
Do you know which ones? Do you remember?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it is a thing that exists. Sometimes there is specifically a category for people who make significant income from sewing or prop work, because if someone's entire income is from like running a prop studio or something, like it's not super fair for them to be competing against people who like, I have a full-time day job. I'm at the chemical plant, like working. And so this is something I'm doing like in a few hours each evening. It's not always really fair for someone whose full-time day job is working on this stuff. So I have seen a couple of conventions have the like professional tier, but that's really rare.
It's not
I don't
common.
think there's not any in Texas that I know of that have this.
Yeah, and any contest that I've ever looked at, I don't think has seen it. So it's very uncommon, but
Yeah,
it exists.
but it is a thing. So yeah, getting into some of the common awards, I have the ones bracketed that are considered major awards typically, but starting with Judge's Choice is a pretty common one, and that's for the judges to kind of recognize a cosplay that they really appreciated the work that went into, but maybe it didn't place at any of the other categories. So like oftentimes it'll be related to either a really well done interpretation from media that the judge really likes, or like a lot of times you'll see someone who's really into wig styling will pick someone with an impeccable wig for their judge's choice. But those are not considered major awards, but they are common in most contests.
Right, and then some other ones on here. So generally contests will have a best of and a runner up of a category. So like we said, there might be like a novice, a journeyman, and a masters. You may have like a best masters and a runner-up masters, a best journeyman and runner-up journeyman. So like it would fall like that. Again, not always, but that is something that does exist pretty commonly. We have best craftsmanship category. Sometimes it's based off of the actual work that went into the costume. Again, that doesn't always exist as an award, but it can. And sometimes instead of best craftsmanship, it might have best armor. Like we have a best armor this weekend. There's like a best sewing or best needlework or like best wig styling. So those can be integrated there. So basically a journeyman, novice, or masters may win one of those categories regardless of what level they're in. Usually there's only one best armor for like the whole contest. A best performance will be there. Sometimes people will enter in to skits specifically, and they may be eligible for best performance, but also even if you're doing a walk-on and you're not actually doing a skit, you could still win best performance based on how you conduct yourself on stage. And then obviously we have best in show, which is no matter what level you're in, novice, journeyman, or masters, you're eligible to win best in show if your costume is just, better than all of the other entrants.
Yeah, and one thing to note is that sometimes, say you entered at a novice level, but the judges thought your costume was better than all the journeymen. They might bump you up and give you best journeyman because you deserved it. If they think your work was at that caliber, you can get bumped up. But at least always ask the coordinators, but most of the time contest rules are based off of the number of awards you win. So even if they bumped you up to masters and you got best master, you're not immediately master. It's okay. You've won one major award. If that's your first award, you're probably journeyman now. So, yes.
How often do you see a journeyman or a novice win best in show?
I would say novice is pretty rare. I would say journeyman happens a lot more than you'd think. I have personally once, but we bumped a journeyman to win. Actually, we didn't really bump them, but they won best in show and they were a journeyman. Mm-hmm. So it happens. Novice, not so much in my experience.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, people getting bumped up just like to the next category is pretty common, I'd say. I see that probably a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Oh, and then that's a wrestling belt I won. Crazy. This convention might not exist anymore. It was in Texas, and I won a freaking wrestling belt, giant belt, which was crazy. Yeah. Anyway, I had to include that picture.
So mad I've never won a wrestling belt. So yeah, moving on to our typical rules. And as always, caveat, these are common things to keep in mind when you're just working on a cosplay and not sure where you want to compete yet, but always read the rules.
Yeah, case in point, last bullet point, always read the rules, because that's going to be your Bible in terms of what you can or can't do for the contest.
Yeah, but so most of the time, the typical rule for craftsmanship is that over 75% of the cosplay has to be constructed by you. I've seen a couple of really weird contests recently where they're like, novice is if you make 50%.
Yeah.
Journeyman is if you make 75%. Masters is 90 or something. And you rank based off of how much you've made. That's not common though. Normally it's just like a percentage that you have to make overall. And some of the common things that aren't made are shoes and undergarments. So especially at the lower levels, like buying a petticoat, that's pretty normal and that would be fine. And heavily modified can count depending on the rules. I competed in something recently where I thrifted a sweater and then completely cut it apart to use it as fabric because I don't know how to knit. And I was just making a tube top out of it. So that also counts. And we'll talk about it in the build books, but anything bought needs to be disclosed. So this includes patterns, anything you commissioned, or like say you bought a blueprint or an STL file. You would have to disclose that to the judges.
Right. And then most costume contests require that there are references available. That way the judges can actually compare against what you're actually replicating or inspired by. Some contests don't allow fan designs. So like there are a few artists some of them are cosplayers, some of them are not, that take the characters and interpret them and make them into different styles. Sometimes those are not allowed. It depends on the contest. Sometimes contests require you to be from a certain type of media, like a Japanese media or a comic, something like that. And build books are not always required. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But no matter what level you're entering at, we recommend bringing a build book. It helps to demonstrate all of the work you put in that you can't convey in the very small amount of time that you have to communicate to the judges. And it also leaves them with an impression for them to actually keep and remember your costume by throughout the judging process, because a lot of people come through those doors and you even giving them something tangible to remember you by does help. Cosplay should be within the convention dress code.
The little blue dude most of the time.
Yeah, so make sure within dress code. And the last item on here we have is no sandbagging, which we're going to talk about on the next slide.
I'll let you.
Me. Okay, so sandbagging, I don't really know where the term comes from. And in fact, sometimes different parts of the country will call it different things. In Texas, we call it sandbagging. I think it's kind of like throwing up a sandbag and letting people like punch it. And I don't know. Anyway, we're not going to go into where it came from, but that's what it's called. Basically, if your costume has won a major award at a larger event, then you should not re-enter that costume in another contest of comparable or smaller size to win more awards and more awards and more awards. Basically, usually major awards, we are outlined, we kind of describe what those look like in the past slide. And some conventions are stricter and don't allow any costumes that previously won awards, no matter what the con was or what level it was at. So for example, I believe at DreamHack when I competed, they said if the costume has ever won anything ever at any con, it cannot be entered into this contest, period. A lot of cons say, ask the coordinator, which is why on the bottom we say ask the coordinator, hey, I won a judges award at, AggieCon. Can I enter this costume into Anime Fest's Masquerade? And they'll email you back and say yes or no. Just be transparent and disclose if you're ever unsure, because if you enter a costume that has won major awards at a large or comparable size and you do sandbag, we will all find out. And that's not meant to be scary or anything, but I mean, the community is not as big as you think it is, especially when you get to the coordinators and the judges and the craftsmanship sphere. People know who sandbags, and those people are usually blacklisted from competing at conventions and, not allowed to enter into contests regardless of the costumes they make. People that, might sandbag in Texas people in California will find out about it. Like it's that intense, because there is a really poor sportsmanship with bringing a costume that may be, blow everything out of the water and just keep doing it over and over and over and over again, and not giving anyone else the chance to even like win and show their work, because you've already been awarded for this piece of art that you made. Why are you continuously doing this over and over again with no more effort required for each serial win that you're doing? So it's just in poor taste. Sometimes you can upgrade your costumes. If some cons or conventions will say, if you add XYZ to the same costume, you can re-enter. The main thing is just ask the coordinator, because at that point, even if you enter in a costume that's previously won something, and you might get like some heat or some people calling you like, hey, like that person already wore this to this convention, why did they do it again? Having a receipt in an email saying, no, I asked and they said this is okay, that is good to have. So just ask.
But personally, I will say I try to err on the side of caution here, because even if you do have that email receipt saying it's okay, if what you did seems kind of sus to other people, like they will talk about it. Like the community is pretty small and not everyone might know that was actually okay. So it's generally a good idea to avoid controversy in general as far as sandbagging goes. But yeah, this is like the major no-no with contests. As long as you do this right and read the rules whenever you enter, you're good. You're golden. Yeah.
Exactly.
So.
Walk on our skit. How do you choose? Walk-ons are basically, you go onto the stage, you have usually 30 seconds, you get to show your work, and then after 30 seconds, you leave. Skits are going to be usually a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes, sometimes up to 3.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh my God, no, that sounds evil. And they're good for performing and demonstrating what your costume can do, how it moves with you, how you construct it, and how you rig it to your body. It's good for telling a story, and you usually have props with you on the stage or sets that you can use to convey the story. Walk-ons are going to be great if you don't want to put all the time and energy into providing audio, coordinating your performance, or if your costume just isn't really a performance piece because of your mobility restrictions. I will say that walk-ons are less likely to win a best performance, but that has happened. Sometimes whatever the contestant in the walk-on does on the stage is actually a better performance in those 30 seconds than any of the skits that have entered the contest with their offerings.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah. So and also, I would say less likely to win best performance, but the walk-ons are usually more craftsmanship focused. Now, that being said, craftsmanship still matters when you're doing a skit generally. If you have 2 skits that are of equal caliber and one made their whole costume and one did not make their costume, usually the judges are going to pick the one that made their costume. It just puts you ahead. The TLDR, I think, of what this panel is about also is that anything you can incorporate to put yourself ahead of your competition, you should try to do. And it can be little things like, oh, I made this entire costume versus I modified this entire costume and we both did a skit, right? So that's in there. But skits can be less craftsmanship focused because not all conventions require a skit to have made their costume. Some conventions say they don't have to have made anything. They just need to do their performance. So the judges have their own rubric and criteria, and the rules will be, again, online for you to see before you enter. And last thing I'll say here is, like I said, stage presence matters in a walk-on. I have won an award and given an award where the tiebreaker was who performed better in the walk-on. The costumes were comparable, but the person that actually emoted and did a really good job performing, they, even in their walk-on for 30 seconds, they won. And I have also won because of what I did on stage in just a walk-on before, so it's important. Yeah.
When you say performing and emoting, are you talking about like interacting with the crowd just as a thing, or like playing the character that you were cosplaying?
Both, depending on what you're wearing. So it can be facial expressions, it can be how you actually hold your body, how you walk through your movements, what you do with your props on the stage, how long you hold your poses for, all of that. So, and some characters, they might, like an idol or something, might want to hype up the crowd, right? So it just depends.
Yeah. But yeah, so talking about that stage presence, so for walk-ons, you typically would have 3 poses, and those are often marked with X's. So like, here's 2 typical stage configurations, and often it would be like you come on, you go to your first pose, second pose, third pose, and then you would exit. And it's really important, part of your stage presence is to hold your poses. I am bad about this sometimes because I don't like being on stage. So I get on stage, I like pose, 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 run. But it's one of the worst things you can do if you don't hold your poses, because the judges and the audience can't really like see what you've made. Because I'll get really sad sometimes when I see a really cool cosplay and it's like a drive-by.
Yeah.
They're just like sprinting across the stage. So that's really important. And then
I was gonna say here, just usually you're gonna do your 3 poses, 30 seconds, and then leave. Sometimes the judges may ask you questions on the stage. They should tell you if you're going to have to answer questions while you're on the stage before the contest starts. Just be aware that that can happen depending on the contest, and just think of something to say. I can't answer. Usually it's like, what's your favorite part of the costume? And then when you go on the stage, just like know what you're gonna say. But yeah, that can be uncomfortable for some people. So just know that that can happen, but it's not common.
yeah, and it's just really important to like make sure your emotions and gestures are large enough to translate. This kind of depends on how big the contest is, like how big the audience is in the room. But if like we had a massive contest and you're on stage like
Yeah.
you know, people in the back aren't going to be able to see you. So I have go slower than I go here.
This is an example of
But
what not to do.
yeah, don't go this fast, but just in general, kind of like hold props out, be large.
The emotes are
Just-
good with like the how big you're emoting is great. It's
Yeah.
just too fast,
Yeah,
right?
so like go slower than this, and you can kind of see, you can't really see the cosplay super well here because I'm just like sprinting. So make sure you take your 30 seconds because they're given to you. Don't give them back. They're yours.
Yeah. Oh, but again, posing. So look at references for what your character does. Sometimes the references are not anatomically correct and you can't actually do them, but it gives you an idea of what you might do. Practice in a mirror is helpful to see how big you need to really hold your arms out to make space. Generally, when you're posing, and even for photos, you want to make space between your limbs and your body, or else you can end up looking like a blob.
and triangles.
Right, triangles are helpful. Just practice in the mirror beforehand, and consider your mobility in your costume, because you may want to like do a salute, but if you pick your arm up this high, is your pauldron going to pop off? You don't want wardrobe malfunctions on stage where everyone's going to go, ooh,
Yeah.
which will happen. Right.
A good way to judge 30 seconds is to get a friend or a significant other and have them time. Like, you sit and do nothing in silence and tell them when 30 seconds have passed. Usually 10 or 15 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or counting your head is what I usually do too.
Yeah. And with choosing your pose, I mean, sure, you can look up like Robin Fire Emblem, and then you'll find just like the boring pose, but you could also just Google cool mage pose and choose ones that are like very big and interesting. So just when you're looking for references, you can kind of expand your range and look for more like dynamic things.
Right.
But yeah, I think we still have a good number of slides, so I'm going to move us a little
Sure.
bit faster probably. But yeah, skits, we don't have as much on skits since we both mostly do craftsmanship, but kind of like we talked about, generally 2 to 4 minutes is what I see a lot of the time. And fighting, very important, must be choreographed and slowed down, like 3/4 speed most of the time. So you can't just go up there and go, bah, 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 bah.
And hit each other. Yeah, I know.
You can't do that.
Take everything with you off the stage. Confetti, usually is not allowed. Glitter is usually not allowed. Streamers can be allowed because you can remove them. If you can remove it quickly from the stage, it's fine, but it can't be something that's gonna like require cleanup with a broom. Audio pre-recorded. If you're doing a skit, it's important because you're usually never getting a microphone. You are always gonna have to lip sync to your audio in the track itself. So be aware of that. And sometimes cons will prevent you from using copyrighted music from a game or from a movie. It depends on the convention. And make sure that your skit is entertaining to the crowd without the crowd having to even have any knowledge of what you're doing. It sometimes can be frustrating as you might want to do something very niche and specific to the media, but at the same time, the judges may not have any idea what you're actually referencing, and neither will the crowd, and you want it to be relatable to enough people to where even if it's something fairly niche, they can kind of get a good idea and at least find the performance entertaining.
Yeah, so some just general notes for skits are like dance and singing skits are typically best when they relate to the source media. Like if you want to do an idol dance, maybe cosplay an idol
Yeah.
or something like that. And one note is that some cons don't allow you replicating existing choreography. So sometimes now there are rules coming out where if you're dancing, you need to choreograph that yourself. You can't just look up K-pop dance video. And kind of like with storytelling skits, you can reference other media. Like I saw someone who had an amazing skit recently and they were referencing Monty Python. It was really cool. And you can either recreate the source material or make an original story yourself, as long as you make sure you have the tenets of storytelling. So it's interesting to people, like rising action, climax, and falling action. Don't just do the same thing for 5 minutes on stage.
Right, and you should be able to incorporate those 3 elements within like a 2.5 minute time frame.
Yeah. So moving on to prejudging, if we could have lovely handlers.
Yeah, we have
pass
build
out.
books that you guys can look at. We have a few examples. And basically, it shows a range of different examples of costumes and also individual versus group entries of costumes. Basically, like we said, you want to come prepared with a build book if at all possible that's printed out. Some conventions will say, oh, you can submit online and we'll provide it to the judges. And in my experience, that almost never actually happens. So bring a physical build book with you. It does not have to be fancy. We have some that are bound. We have some that are in like just folders or binders. You can literally staple it together with a stapler or paper clip, as long as you physically give the judges something. But remember that you might not always get it back. So no matter how nice you make it, it might not be returned to you. Usually you can ask for it back. We got all of ours back after judging from the examples we have here, but that's not always a promise. And things to include, like you'll see in those books, we have reference pictures, very important. Probably one of the more important things to include. Fabric swatches can be helpful to demonstrate the different materials you used on the costume. Progress images. You want to make sure your build books are heavy on the pictures and light on the text, because at the end of the day, the judges only have so much time to judge each costume. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. We're going to be able to actually see those photos and not read through paragraphs of text. Text to help describe what's happening is nice. Minimize it. Summarize your notes, but include what you learned while making the costume, and potentially include images or just text of what we cannot physically see, like corsets or understructures or things that aren't visible to the costume.
That's really the most important thing, because like a good judge should be able to judge what they can see in the room, but how you patterned it, they can't tell that by looking at it, or like what's under it, whether it's petticoat, corset, anything like that, or like your armor rigging. Those are things that are hard to see in the judging room, so that's really what your build book should definitely focus on. And
a good rule of thumb is like 10 to 12 pages for each costume is about the most you'd want to do. Then it gets too long. We don't have enough time to go through it. So if you have a group with 2 costumes, maybe 20 pages, maybe less, but about 10 per costume is a good rule of thumb.
And if you made any alterations to the design, whether it's for mobility or anything like that, or just because you didn't want a skirt that short, it can be good to note it in the build book, just so if the judges are like, well, this doesn't really match the reference picture, if it's a conscious decision you made with a reason behind it, that's fine, just say it. And y'all have, yes?
Would you include like failed attempts? Like I attempted to do it this way, but it didn't end up working out, so I had
You can briefly write about it in text, but don't include pictures.
Yeah, I'd say minimize that, because build books are always so hard to get within that 10-page limit, in my opinion. Like, sometimes mine are not within 10 pages, and they really should be. So it can be hard to limit it already. So focusing on things that aren't physically there anymore and were not the end effect you wanted can be less helpful.
Right.
So you'll have examples. I'm going to go kind of fast through these, but just some examples, like pretty picture heavy. This is a more complicated costume. I'm not a graphic designer. I make build books that function.
Me too.
They don't have to be pretty. They just need the material. You don't have to spend weeks making your build book.
So prejudging key, one, get there early and check in. Try to get there like 15 minutes before your time slot. They might be able to take you early, or at the very least, let them know you're there. Practice what you're gonna say in prejudging. You usually only get 3 minutes, which might seem like a lot, but it's really not to go through your entire costume. So be aware of that time. And also we recommend organize yourself, go from top to bottom, talking about your cosplay, from your headpiece to your wig to your top to everything. And you can make note cards to remember what to say. Even you can bring note cards that way you don't forget to tell them something.
I need to start doing this because I tend to get really stressed out in prejudging and I forget things, and Brody will have to be over there like pointing at parts of his body to indicate what I forgot to talk about. So
Exactly.
note cards are totally fine, and if you have bullet points about things you want to make sure you cover, that can be helpful.
Right.
And also, like, if you have undergarments, I find it helpful to go kind of inside out before top to bottom, because otherwise you might forget them.
Yeah, and then also make sure to talk about what you're most proud of, obviously, what you tried that was new to you, what the judges can't see, and reasons behind the alterations that you did, like we talked about. And don't mention anything that you do not like about your costume. Do not self-deprecate. Do not tell us what you don't think is good. Sometimes the judges won't actually notice if you didn't like it, and sometimes we will notice. You don't have to tell us. So yeah, just don't mention things that you don't like about your own costume. Sell yourself. Don't diminish yourself.
Yeah, it's an elevator pitch, like you're trying to get hired. You want to only talk about the good. Don't be like, well, this seems a little wobbly.
Yeah.
It's like, then I know.
Yeah.
Great. So going on to judging demystified. So craftsmanship judging can be subjective, but generally the cleanliness of execution is number one. And that's just because, like, really what you bring in at the end of the day is the most important. Just like, does it look great? I'd rather someone bought a commercially made pattern and modified it and ended up with a beautiful, stunning end product that's really well finished than if they patterned it themselves, but maybe they didn't do a great job.
It looks a hot
patterning.
mess. Yeah, I know.
So, like, in my opinion, cleanliness of execution is number one priority.
Using a variety of skills, we talked about that before, that's important. If you have self-patterned something, like we already covered that, if you've self-patterned something or self-modeled something versus bought something, that does not inherently disqualify you or make you less than. But what I will say is, if I have a mask and there's two people with masks, and one modeled it themselves and then finished it, printed it, all of that, and then one bought the file and did all the same things, and they look about the same level of finishing and techniques used, you have to go down to the nitty-gritty. Mm-hmm. Okay, they modeled it. That gives them a leg up on the other. So it does not inherently always mean, oh, if I bought the file or bought the pattern, I can't enter. Absolutely not, because you're putting in a lot of work to get it finished, to actually make the thing. But know that it will give you a leg up if you did patterning or modeling yourself.
Yeah, because I like to think of it as kind of like a tier list whenever you're judging, because like your execution will put you in a certain tier, and then the like techniques you use and what you did yourself, like modeling or patterning it yourself, could move you up the tier. You're always being judged against the other people who are there.
That's important. Is your costume is not being judged in a vacuum. You are being directly compared to who else is there as well. So like, if you don't win something, doesn't mean your costume was bad. Like, you might have made a beautiful, well-constructed, amazing costume, but like, just directly compared to the people next to you, it might not have shown as many techniques. It might not have incorporated as many elements. Just be aware of that. But yeah, that's, at the end of the day, you are being directly compared to the people next to you. You're not being judged against what is good or bad necessarily.
And also important is just how you adapted the media. Your body type, your skin tone, anything like that does not matter, but just how you ended up translating that design to fit you. Because for me, I have a really long torso and really short legs. So a lot of these anime designs that require like so many details on the legs, I have to move around to fit my proportions. And it might not look exactly like how it looked if you translate it 1-to-1, but it gives the same overall effect. So that's important. And then stage presence, like we've talked about, can often be a tiebreaker in like craftsmanship judging, because if two people are really neck and neck, but one just really gives it their all on the stage, that can be a tiebreaker.
Yep.
And like we've said a few times,
Oh,
using
yeah.
resources doesn't disqualify you. Like y'all might have seen on, I don't think I had a leader's build book here because I did not get that one back, unfortunately. But I tend to put a resources used section at the very beginning of the build book to be super upfront about what I used and just make sure you tell it to the judges, but it's totally fine.
Yeah. Etiquette. If you, there you go. Yeah. If you win, accept the win graciously. Like, being excited is awesome, and be excited because you did a really great job.
Yeah, I cry a lot of the time. Don't do that, but I do.
I'm usually too exhausted and dead by the time awards come around that if I win anything, I'm just like a husk of a person. But if you don't place, don't attack the person online. Like, these are basic human decency things that we have to say because they happen. Don't like go online and say how it was rigged, how it was robbed, how they don't deserve it, how it was just a dress with appliques and nothing more. And if you really want to vent to your friends, or if you have a concern about like objectivity or fairness, email the coordinator, email the director, but don't put it online publicly.
And this is why we say to review the judging panel ahead of time, because if you're not confident that they can judge fairly and accurately, then you shouldn't be competing there, in my opinion. So like really just like being confident in your judging panel, and then remembering that the judges have more details about everyone's cosplay from prejudging than you know. So like, sure, maybe you disagree just by looking at their cosplay backstage, but like you didn't read their whole build book, you weren't in there in prejudging.
Right.
So like, you just make sure you're confident in the judges, and that really eliminates a lot of this like, oh my god, I didn't place.
Right. Usually conventions like this one will have a feedback panel on Sunday where you can actually go and ask for tips, advice. A lot of this will probably be covered in those types of feedback panels, like suggestions on what you can do to improve or better your chances, and attend those, or just go ask the judges in person at the convention. A lot of times we're really busy, so sometimes emailing us after and then letting us give feedback in like an Instagram DM or an email after the convention is maybe better.
Yeah, or sometimes reaching out to the coordinator to see if the judges are open to giving that feedback can be a good idea, because some judges don't really like to do that and they don't want to be confronted directly. Like DMing like, why didn't I place? Tell me. So sometimes I've heard that it can be good to go through the coordinator just if the judges don't tell you that they're willing to talk directly.
Right. And then last but not least, if you don't place or win an award and you're really proud of your work, you can always bring it to another convention. You know, we talked about sandbagging and all of that, but at the end of the day, like if you didn't win something and you want to compete again, bring it to another con, because you can only control what you do and not what the others show up with. It just may be the case that the people that showed up outran you in certain elements and your costume was still great and you just couldn't be put into a award slot. That happens. There's only so many awards and so many entrants. So I would say that sometimes if you don't place in a contest, that could be an indicator that something needs to be improved, or you could add to the costume to incorporate more elements to just amp it up a little bit. But it could also mean that just the competition was really stiff and that there's not enough awards to go around.
Yeah. And here I have a picture of, taken by Barry actually right here. I have a picture of the time I did a skit. We did not place.
Time I did a skit.
it was deserved. I was a band kid, not a theater kid. Yeah, you know, we were a little disappointed. And we just went home and we're like, damn, that sucks. And we moved on with our lives. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to like go online and vent and be like, the judges, they don't understand the complexities of my media or something. But yeah, so that's all we have. We can move it to the
Yeah,
next one.
so if you want to find us online, our QR codes are there, Stitch Crimes and Savage. You can also come get a card in a minute or two. Does anyone have any last questions that you wanted to ask? If not, no tea. If you want to ask a question, ask it. You can also DM us on Instagram. We're both pretty receptive. We'll give you suggestions and pointers and feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank y'all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. And have a great rest of your Friday. And if you're competing, we're not that mean. I'm not that mean. Watch out for her.
Excuse you.
Yeah. Oh, hey.
All right.
Cool.
I think we're good.